Okay, hi everybody. Today is Wednesday, July 10th. You are at the K8s Infra working group bi-weekly meeting. I am Aaron of Sig Beard. I will be your host today. You're all going to adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct by being your best selves, and you can go watch yourselves doing that on YouTube later when I post this recording. I will go ahead and post the agenda in chat. I figured the usual thing we start off with every meeting is for Tim to tell us how we're doing on a billing perspective. Since Justin's not here, if somebody has access to the billing report that Justin has been sending out, it would be cool to sort of compare those numbers as well.
I don't have Justin's report up at the moment, but I do have the dashboard up from Cloud. Let me see if I can get to the bottom of the table. I'm showing, last 2 weeks, right? Custom range. What's today? 7/10. From the 26th to the 10th, I show $47.60. Why is that so different? Oh, it looks like some of the machines got turned down, or? Well, the top usage is still those machines in the cluster, SSD, DNS, and then a relatively short tail of things, load balancing, capacity, PD capacity, still not GCS. We still don't have a measurable number on that.
Okay. I don't know how that we need to spend a ton of time on this, but just a quick show of hands or whatever, like who here actually gets the billing report that's sent out over email?
I do too. I think it's the K8s Infra cluster admins Google group.
Okay. Cool. Thank you for that.
Hold on, I can pull it up real quick if I can find it. Oh, there it is. Billing report, July. Loading. Interestingly, I have not gotten it recently. Not since July 1st.
Okay.
Huh. Justin.
Nikita or Dims, are you seeing the same things, or are you seeing it?
Checking it right now.
Okay. Well, let me know in chat, and I'll post something about that in the billing issue. And I feel like that's kind of all I want to talk about with respect to billing this week, unless we have any other follow-ups. There was other stuff about like her namespace stuff and how we would analyze billing for storage, but I don't think we've made any progress on either of those.
Just the quick act that I haven't received anything after July 1st as well.
I can confirm the same. July 1st.
I'll send Justin a quick note right now.
Okay. Okay, so everybody's call here, the order that things are listed on the agenda, I should go through our AIs, and the only AI I took from our last meeting was for us to decide whether or not we're going to use Terraform or Bash for the cluster stuff. Alternatively, we could get there when we get there and run through the milestone. I feel like I want to just ask, is anybody, where are we with trying out the Terraform stuff versus using Bash scripts to stand up and tear down a cluster?
So I read over Arnaud's PR with a fine-tooth comb. I had a bunch of comments, some flags that I thought were missing. Which I guess if Christoph transliterated that script, then the Terraform would be wrong also, or wrong, arguably wrong. I was hoping that we could get agreement on the script being the API that I know, so that if we have agreement, like this is what the cluster we want to looks like, then I can compare it pretty easily against the Terraform. So that's what I was really hoping for. I was going to teach myself Terraform once we had conclusion on that script.
So one question I had here is, I know Arno is working on the bash script, but Christoph, are you working on the Terraform script equivalent?
Well, sorry, I guess it's just a misunderstanding from what we had the last time we met, because I thought we were going to focus on the Terraform script and not the bash script, because I didn't want Arno to basically put in a bunch of work to fix up the bash script if we're just going to chuck and toss it. At least like the high level direction of like, hey, this looks acceptable enough for us to change settings around to match. Because, yeah, like as far as like GKE specific settings, even the settings that we choose, even if we like go with this script, once we start actually like putting stuff out there, we may need to choose non-default things for a particular cluster. Like we may need to go with SSDs for Prow, because I know Prow's clusters just converted to all SSDs where they were previously spinning disks. So things like that may change, whereas like the default may be just spinning disks, but then specific types of clusters, like there may be one-offs that we need to change and alter. I don't know. The script, like from the Terraform perspective, I tried to make it readable and I tried to make it like with comments and stuff. And I tried to also put in like actually manually specify non-default settings so that, or sorry, actually call out what the default is and like be explicit about the default so that if we need to go back and change it, we know exactly which flag to flip.
Okay, so maybe I misinterpreted last time then. I focused on getting the script to a completion point, but if we agree that that's not what we should do, like I don't see any reason why not to use Terraform other than I don't know it well enough to actually review it meaningfully. I can make my next block of review time go learn Terraform, which doesn't seem that daunting, honestly, but I'd have to go do it. If we think that's the vector for progress, I would like at least Arnaud to agree, since he put in all the previous work. Anybody disagree with that? Justin's not here, but I can sense his virtual thumbs up.
So I had one question on this topic, which is, does the Terraform provide all the knobs that we need from calling gcloud directly? Does it provide everything, or will we end up writing a lot more Go code than what we would have done with the bash script?
When I went and developed out the Terraform stuff, all the knobs that Arnaud was setting were there, with the exception of one that was literally in flight by like the Google open source engineers that work on Terraform. Like Google has a team that works on the Terraform provider, and it was because the feature is in beta. It's the GK, like the namespace specific usage stuff, and dumping that out to BigQuery. That bit is still in beta on GKE, so that hadn't made it into the beta provider yet. So that, it was literally like the week that I was working on it was also the week that they were working on it. And then it made it in. I was able to test it basically like the day before I put the PR up. And then it was at head, and then the published provider was published a few days later. So the version that's in the Seeblecker K8s cluster, like the Git repo, that is like something that anybody can clone out, and it'll pull down the right versions of the providers and have the right connections to things to make it work.
Okay, so the sequence would be, if we need something, then we talk to this team, get them to add, or we go provide a patch to the Terraform provider for GKE, and then import it into our repository and then use it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Go, so it's easy enough if we wanted to go and add it ourselves. But there is also, there's Google engineers who do that actively. So chances are, before we realize that we need it, they've already realized that it's a new feature and are adding it.
Correct.
Yeah, that team is highly motivated to keep all the current features supported.
Okay, that definitely helps. I think worst case scenario, would we be able to drop down to gcloud and launch command lines? That's the next question.
Yes. So I have done that in one specific case years ago where something wasn't the way it was easier to do it in gcloud. Yes, you can actually drop to terminal and run any manual terminal command.
Okay. So any objections to shifting the focus then? I apologize for having wasted time on that.
I wouldn't say it was just you that interpreted that way, Tim. I thought that the goal for this week was to get to the point where we've had people like iterating on standing clusters up and really exercising this. And I feel like what I'm hearing is we haven't gotten to the point where a person is actively standing a cluster up and putting stuff on it, tearing the cluster down. And I want us to get to that point. I am very sympathetic to the amount of time that has been spent on the bash. I'm even fine with us just like landing it someplace so that it lives somewhere other than a PR if we need something to compare against as a reference. But I do feel like everybody was leaning hard towards Terraform the last time we met. We're still leaning in that direction now.
I am fine with that, totally fine with that. If that's the direction we want to go, then I will I have some time this afternoon. In fact, let me move my calendar around. I have some time this afternoon that I can spend trying to use Terraform for the first time.
Yeah, it's new to me as well. I'll have to learn as well.
Is it going to hurt?
So the two things that anybody needs to be able to test this out is access to the test project. Because right now things are set up in such a way that there's like there's a hard-coded value in the Terraform config that goes, go do it in this project so that you don't accidentally mess it up and do that on something else. So you need access to the test project, and you need access to the state storage on terraform.io, because that was just the easiest place to dump the state storage. We could possibly go with GCS, but I don't really see a need to. It's just basically self-hosted versus the SaaS version.
So how does one get access to the state storage?
Right now it's manual. It's me adding it. That may be the driver for GCS.
Exactly. In the meantime, do you want to add myself and I don't know who else wants to play with it, Dims?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't mean to sign you up for things, Dims. So
no, I want to. I already have access to the cluster, but I don't have,
I think it's crucial that we work out how we're going to share our state with Terraform. Most of the fun atrocities I have experienced with Terraform come with different people messing with a shared state. And
that's actually one of the nice things about using the hosted version of the state is because it handles all the locking and it's basically it's magic for you. But you're able to do the same thing with GCS. It's just a few extra knobs that you have to turn.
Yes. It's not lost on me that one of the keynotes at KubeCon EU was somebody talking about how they accidentally their clusters with Terraform. This sounds like this is code that lives in your repo, Christoph. When do we want to get to the point where we move all of this into K8s.io? Would that help people mess around with it?
I can open a PR. I haven't wrapped it in anything. Like, it's possible to wrap this in a container. It's possible to wrap this in something else to make it easier.
Dump it in a directory.
Just put the directory up there.
A directory with some basic instructions for noobs is a great starting point. If we all agree that we like it, then actually wrapping it in a container and a makefile is sort of the typical pattern for such things, so that people don't have to download stuff to their desktop, etc.
Yep. Yeah. Agree. Totally. A README and a PR in a new directory is good.
Okay. Arnaud, I'm seeing a thing from you about Terraform in chat, so I'm assuming you are okay with this course of action as well. It's your call whether you want to close your PR or if we land it someplace temporary. What do you want to do there?
Hello.
Yeah, we hear
you.
Okay, I'm fine to use to migrate from Bash to Terraform because it's more easier to use Terraform for everything we want to do in the next month.
Okay. So it sounds like we're gonna close the PR number 250 and say we're gonna do Terraform instead.
All right. I'm still going to cross-reference 250 to make sure that I understand how Terraform is achieving all of the same results.
Okay. I think that is fair. Cool. Anything else on that?
I still have one question about, it's about the requirement we need for all the GK clusters, because I think it's important to sell all those requirements before we start with Terraform. I don't know if it's possible to define this now.
You mean like which flags we want for all clusters versus which flags are decided per cluster?
Exactly.
I don't know the answer to that yet. If we can get the first cluster to a place where we think the first cluster in my mind is this utility cluster that runs the sort of mishmash of random stuff. If we can get that to a place where it can run the K8s.io redirector and the GCS web and the other baloney that runs in there, then we can extract that on the second one and see what we think is the consistent subset. And then I assume Terraform has some way of inserting that as a base or something.
The usual pattern is provide sane defaults, but then variabilize out the things that you actually, like the knobs that you want to be able to turn. And then you can provide just like a variabilized input file of like, hey, I need to turn these specific knobs for this cluster.
Okay, so when we get to that point, I think we'll be looking to you guys who have more Terraform experience to help make sure that that's canonically done.
Okay.
Otherwise, we'll write Terraform code like we write Java code. I mean, Go code.
Cool. Okay. I think we've killed that horse to death. I'm gonna share my screen and walk through the remaining issues that are in this milestone, and then we can get to open discussion. Okay, I think you are seeing my awesome dark mode GitHub project board. And so I talked about Terraform, and this is sort of our umbrella issue, but this is really what we're working on right now, is iterating on burning down the cluster and recreating it in some automated manner. There was this issue here about like, should we be doing something about RBAC roles that are the same as IAM roles? And Tim had a question about whether or not this was the same as using Google groups for more fine-grained cluster authorization. I kind of feel like this sounds like tie a role to a Google group, but this doesn't necessarily describe, but what things should that role have access to, which is sort of what I was led to believe. I'm fine with like closing one issue and dumping that scope in another thing, but am I capturing what we think this scope?
I see what you're asking. Right. So I have not set things up that way so far. We could. I have tried to avoid creating custom roles, just, I don't know, because that's the path that I knew best. But we could actually one-to-one the roles with the groups, and that might actually make life easier. I had not thought about it that way.
I actually like this. We touched on this, I think, last time, and I was thinking about it since, like whether we turn the security groups feature on or off, and like the level of management. So it is an extra level of management. The one advantage that I can really see to us turning on this feature is being able to, because it's where you set your authorization settings. Do you set your authorization settings at the project level and just use project, like divvy out your IAM roles at the project? Or do you do it inside the GK cluster and let the GK cluster itself do the lookups for the groups? The one advantage is if we had a project where we have like multiple clusters in the same project, but we only want to give people, like we want to give people different access to different clusters within the same project. Like one cluster you get write versus another cluster you get read.
Right. And well, and actually it goes, yes, it's true for clusters. It's also true for things like storage buckets. So if we defined roles for the IAM side of things, then I don't have a fine-grained way of saying the CSI team has access to the CSI staging bucket and the Core DNS team has access to the Core DNS bucket and not the vice versa. But we do have a couple of sort of global roles like artifact admins and cluster auditors and those sorts of things that we've defined universally. And I think we've just open coded the permission sets for those. I'll have to think about whether it is actually going to simplify anything in order to change that, but it makes sense. I'm still, there's two issues open here, right? There's this one, I'm fine, like I said here, I'm fine with starting with less granularity. I just want to make sure that if we decide we want to go with a more granular access, that we actually haven't locked ourselves out of it.
It also gets to the auditing part of the AAA as well, because if you're handling all the RBAC permissions on the cluster, if you have cluster permissions, you can also elevate other people into an admin position on the cluster. Like you can say, hey, this random Gmail account, you have RBAC permissions on the cluster, as opposed to that being set from the project level down. Like you're handing over the authorization settings for your cluster down to the cluster, as opposed to having them come down from the project level.
It's true.
That sounds like entropy generation.
Well, first of all, only people who have RBAC to grant RBAC can grant RBAC.
Yeah. I'll also just throw out there, I just read in the issue that's shared right now, we kind of had this discussion 14 days ago, and we landed on like, let's do something non-granular, and then decide if we really need the granularity.
Right. I have no objections to that. I will, now that I understand the difference between this and the other issue, I will think about whether the handful of global, universally applicable roles make sense to make into actual roles, even at the organization level, which we could then just inherit to all projects. It might actually make things simpler.
Can you help me understand what the difference is between these two issues then?
This is about, the enumerate RBAC is about access to things within the cluster, within a GKE cluster. The IAM roles are about the access to cloud resources that are spread across different projects. The best example that I can come up with is the artifact admins. We have this group called artifact admins, which is ostensibly people who can help unstick any situation with any storage project. So all the staging projects and all the prod projects. And what we've done for every staging project is just grant that group access to the bucket that we create. And it's the access that we've granted them is like 2 or 3 different permissions. We could make a role that encapsulates those 2 or 3 permissions and then say this Google group gets this role. They're one-to-one with each other. And that way it's everybody's permission grant is one single grant. That's the simplification. At least this is my interpretation.
Okay. Everybody else agree with that? Not hearing a no. move forward. Okay, that's everything for cluster management. Speaking of IAM, there was something about creating IAM dump scripts.
There's an open PR. I pinged Hippie on it a couple last week.
Yep. Let's see here.
And as of yesterday, there was no update on it.
Okay.
And I don't see him here. I'm happy to take it over if we want. It has grown quite a lot and is trying to tackle a whole bunch. I would rather get it in and iterate. But I don't want to, take it away from Hippie since he's put all the work into it.
I will see if I can ping Hippie. I believe I'm due to meet with him later today and ask him what his opinion is.
Cool. Yeah, I'd like to get this just to a beachhead of just the IAM based stuff, and we can add the per service explorations as follow-ups.
Okay. Take inventory of the Google groups we created. Tim's, let's see. This is not assigned to you. This is assigned to Tim.
So I took a pass through the issues a couple days ago. I think this is done. I just want to run the full audit script to convince myself that there are no vestigial individual assignees left, and then I can close it.
Okay. Christoph, make file for the groups reconcile thing.
Yeah, I still haven't done that. I should.
Friendly poke.
Friendly poke again. Yes, I'll do that.
Go run works fine. So
Go run has been working fine for basically Tim's and I are the only two who've been running it, but now we got Tim. I guess I got to throw makefile in there.
Yeah. So Tim has to throw the makefile, right? Because he's the
right
new
in the
guy.
heart, man. Right in the heart.
Okay. I'm also going to move that to in progress. Okay, so that, and we can't have a job to run the IAM script unless we have the IAM script. I think I plumbed the depths of things related to IAM. All right. Let's talk about container image promoter. Dims, I kind of want you to take the lead on this one because I feel like I saw an email go out to KDev, which makes it sound like we were way further along than I thought we were.
Right. So the thing that I wanted to start in K8s was because there was a lot of people asking for stuff, at least getting to a point where they have a staging repository. We are ready for that part. Even though, for example, in the publishing bot, we would like a greater time for the images to stay there before getting cleared, for sure. So that's the reason why I wanted to, get that process going. So a few people have asked for the staging repositories, and I got access to run additional scripts yesterday, and I've been doing that. So that's the good news. Then there was also a talk on the Slack channel between Amy and Linus and Tim about what more needs to be done to actually run the promotion stuff and get people to log, the SHAs for, doing the update, the promotion from the staging repositories to the final repositories. So one of the things there was an end-to-end test, and then there was request for creating a new service account. And Amy has the pen on that right now to add a script for creating a service account for the test itself. Right, Amy?
Yep, currently trying to decipher Bash.
Okay. Let me know if you need help. It's probably my fault.
Definitely, for sure.
Yeah.
Are you saying it's for sure my fault or for sure you'll ask for help?
Just for sure.
Okay. So as soon as that is done, then between Linus and Amy, they can get going on the promotion end-to-end test and kick the tires there. And then once they are done, then we open up the promotion process to everybody. Does that sound like what you all had in mind, especially Linus?
There's actually one more thing, which is as a convenience function, we should have the promoter understand how to reconcile more than one manifest at a time. Because the current situation is if you were to try to add a bunch of new manifests for new staging repos for the promoter, you would have to each time update the prod job to say, hey, use this manifest. I think that's very cumbersome, so we don't want to do that. So there is an open issue on the issue tracker for the promoter on this topic. I've labeled this and other stuff related to the E2E tests as priority, like critical or urgent. So I think those are the remaining issues to get us past the gate of, it's, I guess, widely available or GA, but there's also one other topic that's been on everybody's mind, I think, which is disaster recovery, which hasn't really been fleshed out yet. So one part of that is actually the other side of the same coin is disabling the promoter from deleting images. That's actually really easy to do. You just move that code out from the binary, so that's not possible. The other side is, in case for whatever reason we need to restore images, disaster recovery, that's like another topic, but I don't know. Tim has expressed concerns about having to have that in place before we, announce that it's available for wide, consumption, but I don't know, maybe you could elaborate, Tim.
Right.
I've expressed my concern mostly in the form of what would the news story look like if the entire K8s.gcr.io repo was not present one morning? We all came to work and nobody could pull anything because it was all gone.
What's that story today?
The story today is at least mitigated by the fact that we have one source repo with one promoter that is controlled by about 6 people. Once we go broader, I don't know how many people have access to the credentials that Prow holds that the promoter can push. I don't know for sure how that's secured. It feels to me like the chance of a leak of those credentials is much higher now. And honestly, I'm not super happy with where we are today anyway. I'm honestly sort of ulcerative about it. And so the sooner we have a story in place, even if the story is simply we have 2 promoters that push to 2 separate repos and they have different credentials or something, I'm not sure exactly what a good story would be, honestly. Given that GCR doesn't have a way to prevent deletion. You get where I'm going though, right?
Sorry, what was that?
You get what I'm saying though, right?
Yeah, well, so I think then that issue of disaster recovery is not really a blocker per se for the promoter itself. It's been an issue that's been around it's an issue that exists today in our current infra, which is what you're saying.
It exists today, but it will be exacerbated by being much more public, the credential and the set of people who are using it will be much broader, or the set of people who will be having access to it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion. I feel like if we have not had impetus to fix this so far, if we go live with this, we won't have the impetus to fix it again.
So one sec here. Aren't we running this in a trusted cluster, Linus, which is not in the general pro pool?
I think so. I'm not the person.
It runs on the same cluster as the Prow components themselves. So anybody who has sufficient credentials to be on call for Prow can see secrets that are loaded into Prow.
Right, but even that group is a small group. It's not general.
It's not the world. No, it is also a pool of like 6-ish people. I have a sort of longer term interest of growing the size of that pool, although we could figure out how to do that while restricting their access to secrets. I think what I'm hearing from Tim is not that like this moving to the container image promoter would require us to invent a whole new disaster recovery process for a technical reason. It's more Tim is concerned that it may be more likely that we encounter an oops, my containers are gone situation when we move to this.
Whether that's a bug in the promoter or a malicious attack on the promoter code or somebody leaked a credential or whatever, it just feels broader. And I'm trying to wear my responsible adult hat. We can't go back and shut off the existing repository, but I'm really sort of anxious about the lack of sanity here.
So I think Amy asked a good question in chat. Just to be clear, we have no way of snapshotting, right?
That might be an acceptable answer. It might be simply that we have a separate registry that we keep as a snapshot of K8s.io from every 3 hours or something. I think I would accept something like that as an answer. I just want somebody to have written it down and said, here's what's going on. And if, God forbid, we had to do a full restore, even if it's manual, here's how we're going to do it.
Just quickly, with regards to the security aspect with Prowl, I've recently been chatting with Ben the Elder, a few days ago about what Kind is going to do for publishing images, because aside from whether or not we should use the staging repositories, we had concerns around putting Docker Hub credential or any kind of Docker credentials into any cluster that could be controlled by Prowl, just because any stray LGTM or approve into the tester infra repo could get a job in there that actually then exfiltrates those secrets out potentially. All it takes is one thing to get into that repository, and it gives it up. So the keys to that Docker image bucket seems like they should be very well guarded regardless.
Yes, I think what you're saying is correct. And when I spoke with folks about Prowl before, it was largely the same. Like whatever the Prowl target cluster is, has to be dedicated to that purpose.
And that's the same risk that we have with all the credentials that we have, but like there's ways we can mitigate that in Prowl. Like we give Prowl high level credentials right now anyways. Like it has multiple owner keys to our GitHub, like our entire GitHub organization. So there are patterns for using, like giving very sensitive credentials to Prowl and running them in a way that is safe and running them away from the PR code, running them away from the build code.
Okay, Amy has the floor.
So it seems like there's like 3 different ways that we can tackle this. Well, we could do all 3, which is removing the deletion, which is already a GitHub issue, protecting the credentials, and then the third one is the snapshot of the K8s registry, right? Is that what we're kind of all agreeing to?
I think a snapshot is an example of a disaster recovery plan. That's all I'm really asking for is, well, a snapshot and a doc that says, oh my God, the whole thing is gone. What do I do?
So, Tim, I kind of feel like it would be helpful for us to have a document that describes what the disaster recovery plan is today. To start with. Because it is unclear to me whether that is documented.
So you have it. I think it's on your file system. It's dev no.
Is that okay? Okay.
Well, I mean, honestly, we have 3 replicas in the 3 regionals, and we have the staging repo, and that's sort of the state of the world today.
And so the disaster recovery plan would be just re-pushing from the staging repo.
Correct. And we have the manifest history in Git, right? So we can always go back to any, or not in Git, but in Perforce internally.
Well, I mean, that only goes back, like a year.
Also true.
Just doing like literally 60 seconds of quick Googling, like no understanding that.
Okay,
VCR.
yeah. So I think you summarized that accurately, Amy. I was trying to suggest that maybe inventing a better disaster recovery plan is kind of blowing scope here. But it sounds like we should at least be doing a cursory glance at what the disaster recovery plan is. And if need be, we can fall back to something slightly better than dev null.
And also it's like, it seems like we can decide like whether or not a disaster recovery plan is a blocker or not, considering like, well, Linus brought the point up that it's like we're not changing the existing state of disaster recovery plan, but and then Tim said that it's more like the promoter will exacerbate the existing problem. So I guess my point is like, it seems like next steps is let's make one and then figure out whether or not it's a blocker or not. To the image promoter being sent out to everyone.
Right. I kind of agree with you, Amy. So I want to separate two things. The first thing I want to be able to do is like somebody who's not working on promoter right now, they should be, what are the things, like we take one group who want to do the promotion and work with them to, test this whole sequence, them being able to push something to a staging repository and then opening a PRs for doing the promotion and the promotion actually kicking in, and then us being able to look at the logs for the promotion to see if it really happened, and then going and checking if all the replicas got updated, right? So I want to walk through that whole thing, as a first step. And that's the point when we can make a decision whether whether we can open up to everybody. I want to do this initial thing first. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes, I think so. So you're saying we've opened up the gates for everybody to have a staging repo, but we're going to be really selective about who we actually promote from the staging repo.
Correct.
Wrapped up in this, I am hearing an assumption that we're going to start with sub-project artifacts before we consider promotion of components.
Correct. The first one was the cube cross thing, right? We wanted to do the cube cross. So let's start with that. We'll run through the whole thing and make sure that all the pieces are there, and we know how to update, for example, the pro with the new manifest, even if it's by hand, right? Just making sure that the golden path is there, and then we can start tweaking it.
I think that's worthwhile, and making sure that everybody's happy with the way the promoter works and the process and the schema. That's, yes, we should totally do that, and the build image is a good one to start with. We can't flip the vanity name until everything is done, which means that in the meantime, anybody who's using the promotion will be using a name that isn't the vanity name. Does that make sense? And what I want to not happen is for that, like the physical address to be propagated too widely, because we have a virtual address that we want people to use. And we went through great pains to weed out almost all uses of the old physical address in favor of the virtual address. I'd rather not do that again.
Understood. Agreed.
So I think I hear your suggestion, Dims, but I just want to make sure, like, my gut would be to suggest that we choose something like Cluster API as the prototype, given the number of people who have approached us from that sub-project. But I heard you say, like, people who aren't working on this. So
yeah, that's perfectly fine too.
Okay, because I feel like maybe Jason, I would treat like Jason as the guinea pig then, and I can trust that Amy has a good working relationship with Jason. And Justin is also highly motivated to see cluster API stuff move forward. So that probably has the most momentum.
I'm fine just getting a few external people to say, yeah, this process doesn't suck. Because if it sucks, then we throw it back at Linus and tell him to do it again. But I'm assuming that we're not going to get any sort of fundamental disagreement with the approach. Maybe that's a bad assumption, but I'm hoping it's not. But before we can do the legacy import, we had a conversation recently too about how we'll bring forward all the legacy images, and I think we've got a rough solution to that. Linus, were you happy with the idea of just bulk importing them into a legacy staging?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the simplest approach. Can't really think of any other way.
And then we need to, I started a thread yesterday about subdirectories and GCR promotion, and if everybody's okay with that, it sounded like at a quick glance, everybody was okay with that idea. We just need to make sure that everybody who's got a staging repo understands that the name of their staging repo is going to be the name of their subdirectory in GCR in perpetuity.
Right. The only question I had there, Tim, was do we know of any container runtimes or any other tooling that will like bomb basically because of this?
Well, they shouldn't, because the format is effectively the same as Docker, right? Today you have docker.io/foo/foo :tag. And so we would have k8s.gcr.io/foo/foo :tag. So it shouldn't be syntactically actually closer to Docker than what we have today. From what I've seen, all the image pullers that I've looked at are fine with both models. Now, whether we want to add arbitrary subdirectories beyond that is a different question.
Agreed. So the only other thing I had there was, would we let the subprojects choose that prefix directory name?
Well, they choose it by giving us a name for their staging repo.
Okay.
Right? So today we've got about 8 or something. We should probably ping the owners of those 8 to make sure that they're okay with those names being the names at which they get published. And if not, we can make one cleanup before we have 80.
Right. We haven't staged anything yet, so should be fine. I mean, when we start staging, they'll realize that.
Well, okay. I mean, what I don't want to happen is to have dozens and dozens and dozens of staging repos only to find people say, oh, I didn't realize the name actually mattered. I want a different name, right?
Yeah. Okay. Fine. That's fair. Yeah.
Do we have an issue template for requesting this yet?
No, because it's a PR, not an issue. You have to send a PR to add the group, and
so here's a thought. When we've been doing these things in the GitHub management subproject, we created an issue. We started off with the issue template first because we didn't have documentation and we didn't want to teach everybody yet how to do it because a lot of the Parabola stuff was in flight. So people would create an issue and then somebody would go and enact that. Considering right now, we still need to, somebody from our side still needs to go and manually run steps to make it happen. I think that seems to me to be acceptable. Like if we create an issue, people log an issue, and then either if that person is comfortable, they can also go create the PR, or we go create the PR and run it.
Sure. We could also have a script that says, given 4 parameters, I will generate all the deltas you need in your local Git repo, and all you need to do is send a PR for it.
Christoph, I'm hearing you volunteer for an issue template.
Yes, that is okay. I will volunteer to throw up an issue template.
We'll get that done right after that make file.
I don't know what the input parameters are, so somebody's going to have to review it though.
Well, you can look at the 3 or 4 PRs that have come through in the last week or 2, and you'll see the parameters there. There's not many.
Okay. Sorry to cut short. Say your piece. Oh, okay. With the 5 minutes we have left, I took a look at the rest of the stuff. I don't know that there's much to discuss. I'm going to ask Dims if he's got anything.
Right. Can I share my screen?
Yes.
Oh, shit. I think it's this one.
And you.
Okay, sorry. So I just want to walk through a few things. So the auto deletion stuff, Tim, you were saying the problem
I was
running.
hoping to have it done before this meeting, but it looks like we actually have to handle the case of the lifecycle policy already exists somewhat differently. So I'll take a look at that right after this.
Then we have a problem with Steven's email address. Basically, he's trying to. He's not able to access all the resources that I created yesterday for the release test infra stuff. So he'll need help debugging. I suggested if somebody else other than Steven in that group, Google group, go try it out and let us know if there's a problem or not. So
was there an issue on what the actual problems were? All I saw was a PR that capitalized his name in an email address, which I thought was weird.
I've just like cursory read the things. I think he's trying to access the entire project's dashboard instead of just the GCS stuff. And we've scoped the permissions that you don't get permissions to all the things in the project. You just get permissions to the exact things you need for the exact thing you're doing. So I think just the way he's accessing it is wrong because the previous system has way more permissive permissions.
And for what it's worth, if we think it's worthwhile, I'm happy to grant like viewer access to that group also. But like you said, we were just trying to be super, super surgical. If it's tedious for people to figure out how to use, then I'll be happy to broaden it a little bit.
Right. So I'll point him your way, Tim.
That's fine. Let him talk to me and I'll deal with it.
Tim, you were able to run reconcile, correct?
Correct. I mean, I didn't have any deltas, but it came back and told me that there's nothing to do. So
okay, perfect. Then the bucket policy.
That's done.
Okay. Then this is the one that we
refresh. A lot of these are merged.
Right. I know. I'm going through the merged ones just to see if there's any follow-ups that needed to be done. So yeah. Okay. The rest are done. And then we talked about this auto deletion stuff, and then wanted to do the open one. Descheduler. How do we want to do this? Who needs to approve stuff?
It's a great question that we've come to now. Who approves these? Since one of these PRs will touch 3 or 4 different directories.
Correct. I don't know the answer to that one yet. So, but we'll need to come up with something on Slack. So
yeah, let's think about. I'll look at this PR and think about with the directories and whether we should have owners that are individual or whether we should have top level owners that says anybody in this list can approve staging repos.
Right. That's all I had.
Okay. 2 minutes left for your open discussion issue, Christoph. Can you convince us not to use bash anymore?
I'm just going to cede this topic. I think maybe we should dedicate some time to this next time.
Okay.
I think the meeting, as it was today, we got a lot done. It was very helpful to get through the things that we got through. But as a larger concept, I was looking through k8s.io/lib, and I started feeling like, wow, this really feels like the hack directory in KK, and then started getting really scared. I don't want to make another hack directory. So I've linked, there's an issue that I've linked in the agenda that was a result of like a big discussion that I had with a number of people in testing and hack directory Kubernetes world, talking about some of the reasons why we should limit bash, including the fact that bash is being deprecated on a Mac and the default shell is going to be over to ZSH, and like a bunch of reasons why bash, especially complex bash arrays, things like that we should avoid. And I would like to, at some point, kind of set a policy. My personal preference would be like, write it and go. ready and go, write in like super like POSIX shell or like a make files, like keep this stuff that's not Go very simple. If you need something that is more complex, like if you need an array, ready to go, would be my assertion, but it definitely needs a bigger discussion.
Right. For me, the thing was, do I have to touch YAML? If I have to touch YAML, then I'm not going to write it in Bash. So that was like a criteria that I used. But
Okay, there's bike shed painting ongoing in that issue. Let's consider that in the context of all of the tools and scripts we have developed for our infrastructure management in 2 weeks. That's our hour.
I just want to quickly ask anybody else. Nikita, you're on there. Zuwaidi, anything else? James, Ihor, Javier? Was there anything interesting that you guys wanted to work on or help with? You know where to find us. Okay, that's all.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you all online and see you again in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Happy Wednesday.